All right. So we're going to run these every other week. If you haven't registered, please register, because I'm going to send you guys a calendar invite. So hopefully that makes things a little easier for you. We had almost 20 people register, so I imagine people will come and go as they can and want. I am going to try and record most of these so that they can be shared out to the group, because good information always comes out of them. Oren, thank you for recommending us to do this. Sorry it's taken me a while to get there. Okay. And then I do want to thank those of you who have had your school sponsor our group, because that's how we're going to keep going for a while, since I don't think we can meet in person, where we've had our sponsors help fund greater conversations, and it pays for the things that we need, insurance and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So thank you. It's heartfelt, and I appreciate it. We have a topic list, which let me just read to us real quick. And I apologize because I've lost that on one of the screens that closed. Give me 1 second. All right, so some of the topics that were requested that we talked about: bandwidth and reopening expectations for the tech department, blended classroom tools and devices, equipment, room setup for hybrid classes with remote pods for students, hybrid classroom setup, bandwidth considerations, HyFlex classroom setups, ideas for the fall, supporting performing arts remotely, live transcripts for spoken English to, so I guess translation, right? Translating into Spanish, return to school, what it looks like and what's realistic, and what kind of camera and microphone using in a classroom for managing distance learning from school. And I personally am interested in many of those topics as well. All right. Who wants to start sharing?
Well, I may be in a slight anomaly here, but we're not worrying about much of that anymore. We've kind of taken the stance of the lead that the Spanish government has told us, and they expect school to reopen in September. And since we're a private school with about 930 kids, and we have the space to do so, we are expecting live classes as normal school. We're either going to be on campus or in virtual school. Those are our two options. And I kind of came from school leadership as a decision to make, and our parents were very happy about that, quite frankly. So maybe that's a bit of an anomaly. We were worried about this, but all of those topics, but it really made our summer a lot easier when we made this decision as an organization. And I kind of, I had a big sigh of relief when that happened.
Yeah, so looking at what's happening though here, I can't imagine that's going to be the case. We're getting worse and worse. The better.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And I worry about, that's why I participate in these things, is because, any bit of information I can share or be a part of is, for my friends back home at this point. Sorry. So, yeah.
David, one question I wanted to throw out just to clarify the conversation a little bit. I know at our school, we've started making a distinction between hybrid and blended. And for the purposes of our internal discussions, we've decided that hybrid means when some students are going to school on some days and other students are going to school on other days. And blended is when you've got some kids in the classroom and some kids at home. So I don't know if those are the definitions other people are working with, but it might help just to make sure we all agree on what we're talking about when we're having that conversation.
Yeah, Joe, to add to that is HyFlex. And I have a feeling HyFlex is going to be the better option for all of us. And I'll share why. I'll share why now. So in my school, we've just had an incident where there was someone at work was exposed to COVID. We don't know if they have it. But anyone who was on campus at the time we've been kicked off for a 2-week period, right? And so I can imagine that's going to happen a lot. And our students, right, are going to need to be able to learn in any circumstance, meaning some of the parents may decide to keep them home, right? Some of them will be in school, and it's going to be fluid no matter what is happening. So I imagine the way we have to structure our teaching is to be able to support the students and the teachers in any of these circumstances, which is why I think this HyFlex idea is winning for me.
So it sounds like you're saying HyFlex is just anything can happen, anything goes.
That's how I'm interpreting it.
Okay.
What we've been told to do, and I know this, is to keep pods together of kids. So if there is an exposure like what Dave described, the people who have had contact with that person would be in a 2-week quarantine. And we would provide virtual resources for those people. That's a lot easier than teaching live classes in a blended HyFlex or hybrid environment. And we were happy to hear that's kind of the decree from the central government, which was good. It makes sense to us. There's obvious questions around what level of exposure. Is it a family member of a student, or is it the student who was at some after-school activity and someone in the after-school activity, has symptoms? Does now that pod need to go into a 2-week quarantine? Because that quickly, just based on exponential growth, that becomes the whole school very quickly. So that's a big question we have, which is still getting figured out, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think we're all running. Obviously, I think we're all running into that same conversations and situations, and I think as we start experiencing it, our plans are going to have to change really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best plans we can make are going to shift day 1 or day 2 on the run, which is why I'm arguing for. I don't have to convince you guys. I understand that, but I'm arguing for HyFlex because it allows any situation for education to continue.
Mm-hmm.
And hybrid might naturally migrate into HyFlex anyways as the situation emerges. But I'm just guessing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there talk there about not even opening in September? Is that part of the conversation as well?
Yeah, no.
Sorry, I doubt it, because most of us want to promote the idea that we, as opposed to those terrible public schools out there, are ready for business. And your money.
Yeah.
All right, so assuming that we're opening schools, our private schools, and no matter what we're choosing, if it's hybrid, HyFlex, or whatever the new terminology will be out next week, how do we plan to do that in terms of technology, right? So there's been a lot of conversation going on with respect to cameras and setting up fallover rooms or failover rooms. And I'm personally want to know more about what you guys have come up with, because we're not at the beginning of our thinking. We've been thinking for a while, and we've been having some conversations. Well, do we really need to add extra cameras? You know, our devices have a front-loaded camera, a back camera. You can point the camera at a science lab. Do we really need to buy an extra camera? It's going to be harder for the teachers to deal with. You know, they have to select the camera in whatever software it is, Zoom, Google, Teams. And where I don't think that's difficult, I can tell you, I know our teachers find it difficult, because when they dock with something, they're like, oh my gosh, nothing's working. And it's, you know, not hard, but their anxiety levels make it hard. So one of the questions I have is, just for the sake of adding an extra camera, is it actually worth it? Or if our devices have cameras built in, do we need to add web cameras? What do you guys think of that? Where are you with that?
David, I'll jump in. Just the pragmatics, and I think this has come up on the listserv, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in Zoom, it appears that if you're conducting a Zoom meeting with students in the class, those students have to, what do they call it, leave the audio. In other words, they have to turn off both the microphone and the speaker in order for them to be able to continue to participate in the meeting. And I assume that that's true for Google Meet as well. Somebody correct me on that. But that means that if there's somebody at home and they want to participate, and you're using one of those tools for that, then you have to have only one device that has one device with a microphone, one device with a speaker. And how do you manage that? That would be the question. So we have been looking at some different options, and we've tested the OWL Pro, and we've tested a Logitech Brio, which was a lot less expensive. It's $300. And what we're really kind of actually, surprisingly, we're really kind of leaning in the direction of the OWL, and I wish it weren't so darn expensive, because it just seems way overpriced. But it has a couple of significant advantages, and one of those is that it is everything in one. With one connection, you've got a microphone, a camera, and a speaker, so you don't have to have multiple connections. And it does a reasonably good job picking out individuals, even if they're not. I was afraid it only would work if people were sitting around a conference table, which obviously is not possible in a social distancing environment. But it's doing a pretty good job with that. And what was most interesting and the biggest surprise for me was, compared with, when you're looking at a static camera of a classroom, you feel like, you might as well be looking at the security camera footage of a convenience store. It's very static and it's boring. And the OWL manages to make it more natural in a way, because it tends to sort of pick out individuals as they are speaking. Now, sometimes it takes a while for it to figure out, who's speaking, and to kind of isolate that person. And the 360-degree thing across the top, I think, is not real helpful, because that doesn't really just make sense to somebody looking on from outside. But I have to say that we were pretty impressed and kind of leaning in that direction at this point. But I don't want anybody else to buy them, please. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just add, yeah, shortages are an issue. I will say we tested an OWL with a diversity conference this summer, and we did have some issues. We ended up using it as a standard webcam, because its little AI of picking people in the room was not as good as we had hoped. So I would just be mindful. We went the route of Logitech meetups, and it has a very similar feature. It will move the lens and zoom in on the person speaking, but we're going to have to turn it off on all of them because we found it more distracting than beneficial. It's a little delayed, and then it'll like crop the image and then zoom out if somebody else speaks. And we realized that the static mount and having that wide view of the classroom, and then the teacher being able, the Logitech Meetup, the one benefit it has is that it has the ability to zoom and to move the lens with a remote control. So will be Velcro to magnetized to the board. If they're on the board, working from the board, they can easily zoom in on the what's being shown. Or if they're teaching from the middle of the room, they just zoom out. And so it gives a little bit more manual control, and you're not subject to this kind of AI, which Logitech doesn't work as well either. If you're working in a meeting room, it's fantastic because you're less dynamic. You'll sit down, you'll talk, and those people will likely continue to talk, and it'll know the frame to size the image to. But when you're in a classroom and like suddenly a student over here is talking and then one over here, it ends up just searching in a very slow manner where it zoomed in after the person has already done. So that's the experience that we have. We still have the Owl, but shortages, like you said, is another issue. I was getting nervous. I'm trying to source like just regular cheap webcams. We went the route of installing a Logitech Meetup on the back wall of every classroom. They're starting the installation next week. But we also want the need for smaller cameras to, somebody could just plug it into their laptop and then just put it on a tripod to do either drawing or working in a lab hood and those kind of things. And sourcing those cameras right now are very difficult. I'm worried that I'm going to spend some ridiculous money paying over MSRP on eBay for them in the last couple weeks. But yeah, that's where we are.
All right, I have a follow-up question to both those. And James, I heard you're putting them on the back wall. Where are you focusing these cameras, and will they work in larger classrooms? So for example, if you're putting it on the back wall, are you focusing it on the students towards the board? And is your focus the students, being able to see the rest of the students, or actually what the teacher's teaching?
What the teacher's teaching, especially that's actually a privacy consideration for us. We don't want to pick up students in the classroom, so we're mounting them. We originally were going to mount them on the drop ceiling and kind of angled down, but we realized that it creates a lot of distortion. We did a test run right at the end with during some calculus review classes, and it just created too much distortion. So we're mounting them on the back wall around 7 feet height. They actually come with wall mounts. And the focus will be on the front of the room because of social distancing. Like a lot of our teachers were like, I don't teach from the back of the room and stuff like that when we pitch it to them, or teach from the front of the room. But they will now. They will not be walking in between the tables at all. We're putting markings on the ground. I don't know if we're going the route of plexiglass, but you will be forced in a box by the front. And that's what you're allowed to walk in. So it actually will work out quite well. And then, like I said, they come with these little remotes that are awesome. It allows the teacher to see on their screen and zoom in, zoom out, and actually move the camera left and right. That said, they do come with costs. We're getting them for about $800 each. And then with installation, we're looking at about $1,000 to $1,200 a room.
So does that pick up the audio well from the back of the class, James?
Too well. The mics on them are unbelievably sensitive. We did them for like our end of year party and stuff, and they picked up conversations outside 30 feet away that they shouldn't have picked up, embarrassingly enough. So they work really well. They do have speakerphones built into them as well. The speakerphones aren't great, but they're as good as an Epson projector speaker, put it that way. Like, it's kind of like tinny and you're not going to get bass or, clarity, but it works. It works much better than a laptop.
Okay.
All right. So I have a question. I'm imagining the teachers in our environment teaching on the smart boards, right? And I imagine that the teachers are still sharing their desktop or sharing their smart notebook in whatever environment, in our case, Teams or Zoom or Google Meetup. And so the students who are remotely viewing, they can see what the teachers are writing. right? Clearer than what they could do with the camera focused on the board. So I guess my question is the sole purpose of this camera that's focusing on the teacher is really to be able to see the teacher as opposed to just seeing what's being written on the board?
Both. We tested it and we found out that some colors were picked up better than others. So we were just, give teachers those guidelines, like use black, use red, don't use green, those kind of things. But you could easily pick up with the camera, even though that zoom, at best case scenario with, a zoom paid account, you're looking at 720p over the thing. You could easily read what's on the board when it's zoomed in. So we went the extra length, which is a pain in the butt, I will say, because I ordered an insane amount of cables and had my basement set up as a test zone. We ordered a way to get USB 3.0 to the wall, which is like oddly difficult. The cameras are USB-C and they are USB 3.0. And in emails with Logitech, it does allow for greater clarity of the zooming in and using that image. You're never using a 4K image, even though the camera is 4K. But in theory, it would pass a higher resolution image to the user, which then Zoom could work with. So we finally found biscuits that would work, or keystones in the wall that we could use to make it work. And the clarity is just fine to read off the board. You may have to write a little bit larger and just choose the markers you use, but that's what we found. We're looking right now, I mean, just like every other private school is, we're, 80%, like assuming like a bunch of Floridians don't flock to Maryland right now, we are going to open up in person with socially distancing. But the thing is that, and I don't know how that's going to work with faculty and staff. That's my biggest question right now, because I know that there's a lot of high risk people that are very concerned and saying, no, I'm not going back. But that's for the higher ups to figure out. But our thing is to support our community as best as possible in the distance learning or hybrid or HyFlex, whatever we want to call it. But that kind of idea that if you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to come, but our teachers will no longer be allowed to print stuff in the copiers and distribute it in the classroom. They must use an LMS. They are expected. I mean, we got a lot of pushback from cameras and recordings in classroom. Like faculty were like, we have sensitive discussions. We have, this is going to be a whole different thing that I have to think about and manage. And, our head of school, this hasn't been communicated to faculty yet because they haven't returned in August, but we've been doing some discussions, have basically put his foot down and said, they're doing it, or we will find somebody else that will. Because absolutely we are supporting our community with webcams, regardless of whether or not people feel comfortable being on them. It's most important that we maintain, our level of service that we promise to families.
All right, so let me transition us, unless there's more questions about this, let me transition us to this idea of these failover rooms where some students may be in other rooms while the teacher's teaching in their room to accommodate a class. What kind of work have you done? What have you found? What plans have you created to follow through on that?
So we actually tested that before we got the word that we can actually have live classes in full capacity. So we were actually just going to give, after we managed the scheduling to balance out live classes with 15 per class, we realized we only needed 6 classes per secondary division. So 6 classes in middle school, 6 classes in high school, once we did all the scheduling of 15 per class. And we found those 6 spaces, and all we were going to do was provide a teacher with an iPad on a tripod and a microphone to stream into the room next door over our network. So never going online, never going to the internet, and have a human being an adult human being in the room with those 15 other kids. So the teacher would be focusing the iPad device, streaming to the Air server or Apple TV, whatever, pick your streaming device in the classroom. And that was going to cost us about $200, 200 euro per classroom. But that's the tripod, the mount, the microphone, cabling, and things like that. It would be actually less. It came out to about 175 per classroom, because we had the iPads. Every school has 12 iPads laying around for the most part. I'd like to assume they do. Any school our size, about 930 kids with, PK3 through high school, we have 12 iPads laying around somewhere. So we were just going to pop those into a tripod and stream them into the next door classroom. With the word of that we can have normal class sizes as long as everyone is wearing a mask. We now don't have to do that. So that's really took a small load off of our back. We toyed with swivel cameras doing the same thing. They just at $1,000 a piece. It didn't make sense to do it. So, and getting a swivel camera at this point in the game is a lot harder than it sounds.
So, Lauren,
I agree.
You're saying we should all be moving to Spain, is what you're telling me.
I hope not. There's a lot more qualified people in this room than I am for my job. So, no.
Yes, swivel cameras, we bought one, and we will probably find a purpose for it. Similar, like we will find a purpose for that owl. Like they are very good in certain settings. Mm-hmm. But I mean, when I talked to them, they said they had a whole school district buy them, and I can't imagine that they are a cost-effective approach. They are very novelty and very, like purpose-based, But they're cool. I mean,
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Our problem was that they came highly recommended from a consultant to create a dynamic classroom. And my argument was, we just want to create a classroom at this point. Like that's all we need to do, and stop being a consultant and having us spend $16,000 when we need to spend $2,400. So So luckily, our head of school agreed. Yeah. I mean, that's what I wanted to and I've voiced this a few times. Be aware that this is a temporary situation. This is not a long-lasting thing. This is, going out and buying 16 swivel cameras we could have afforded to do that, but what do we do with 16 swivel cameras in 2 years? Nothing. They'll sit on a shelf.
That brings up a really interesting point that I'm struggling to get my administration to really dive into. I think we have an opportunity here for longevity. I think the future of education is online. I think this is a good time to bring people up to that level. Like we are subscribing to Zoom now for, I can't remember what we paid for it, around $8,000. We're subscribing to Panopto for around 12, which will do recordings and with OCR and voice recognition. I want to hold on to that stuff. I want to use that as a differentiator. And I really need the buy-in from the administration to set policy around that. That when this dies down, people will record their classes and it'll allow to be in a searchable database that integrates with our LMS. That's huge. That's college level stuff, which if our school is willing to pay the extra $20 a year, we already put the capital cost in there. That could be a differentiator. And that's where I think that this becomes a very interesting intersect with this is kind of like a kick in the pants for the faculty that have kind of, dragged and stuck with the status quo or the curriculum from 20 years ago. And I really want to capitalize on that idea. I just don't know if I'm going to get buy-in. The whole thing, we may end up selling, $65,000 or $80,000 of cameras on eBay next year. Or we're, sticking with this and this could become a really neat thing. I just don't know where that falls. You need to get the very top of the school. You need to get the leadership on board with this model.
Well, somebody brought up print, or somebody brought up printing. And I mean, I manage the print budget at our school, and that's a €50,000 a year print budget. I'm telling my teachers for 3 months, we didn't have to print a thing from home. And guess what? you're not going to be allowed to print anything next year because we can't have someone touching the machine and releasing a machine job or doing copies. It's not necessarily true. But the fact is that we have this opportunity to say, let's reduce our footprint, our sustainable footprint, or unsustainable footprint, and let's go in a sustainable path towards a more digital platform, because that is the future, of education, and it has been for many years. But we have the people who are just sitting there saying, no, but I've always done it this way. I've always handed out worksheets. Well, now we actually are shifting to one-to-one iPads from grades pre-K 3 through third grade, and one-to-one Chromebooks in fourth and fifth grade, and so that we can just do digital worksheets for the smaller kids. The coloring books and things like that, the coloring sheets or the letter worksheets are all going to be apps on their iPads now, not worksheets that the teacher has to print out every morning. We weren't there last year, but like you said, this was a kick in the pants for our teachers to think in a digital way. And it is an opportunity in many ways. And I have 50,000 euro to play with, so.
And that makes up for the cost of the cameras right there.
Yeah. But I just want to be sustainable in this, because it is something we have to all react to, but we also have to be sustainable in it, like to where, yes, you can probably sell, 250 cameras on eBay next year, but do you really want to do that, James?
Nope, not at all.
For those of you who are trying to go without printing, obviously one of the big challenges is math, worksheets. What workflows have you developed for math classes to bypass the need for paper?
So in our middle school, all or almost all of our staff have Surface Pros. If not, they do have a screen which you can write on, and that has been okay. It's not perfect. Our lower school has requested the same, so we'll be accommodating them this year, providing them with Surface. One of the other possibilities is using something like a document camera, the teachers, and they can write on the paper. The only people I've heard who have had trouble writing on screens, I believe, is from my teaching staff. I don't know that I've ever heard the students tell me that they're having trouble, but I don't doubt that maybe a few of them might have trouble. But I imagine, again, a similar solution, or if they have a cell phone, they could take a picture and send that work in. Those are the type of work solutions I would present.
We're using, giving our math and science departments iPads. The teachers, we're giving them iPads with a stylus, and they've actually been using Jamboard quite a bit for their math and sciences, and then the students are able to collaborate on Jamboard.
Are you talking about the hardware Jamboard, or
no, the software, the Google software, and it's a really great collaborative whiteboarding tool, and they've actually used that quite well in virtual school. I don't know how that'll translate to a full curriculum. We had a low bar with virtual school as far as curriculum goes. So I don't know how that'll translate. We went through a lot of our high school IB science program went through and tested out some online science and math testing applications, and really liked two of them. One was pretty immature for high school. It seemed more geared towards elementary school. But there was one teacher who liked that. The rest used another application that we figured for $20 a month in March. Yeah, we'll pay for that subscription for the rest of the year. And then we'll look at a school-wide subscription come September.
Yeah, We went 2-to-1 for faculty this year. We allowed them to opt into it. We got about 70 faculty that said yes. Some said they had their own iPads they wanted, so they are using that. We upgraded their laptops considerably to very nice MacBook Pros because horsepower became an issue for our teachers, especially when they're doing Wacom tablets and other things like connecting iPads and all that kind of stuff. So we upgraded their tech there. We also use Dreambox in elementary school for math curriculum. And for the upper grades, for calculus and algebra right now, I'm working with 2 math teachers. We're looking at WebAssign, which is kind of like a big Pearson, it's very cheap. It's $11 per student per year. And then there's Derivita, which integrates beautifully with Canvas. It doesn't have as big as of a thing as WebAssign, like as big as a question bank, but it's amazing software and it integrates flawlessly right into Canvas so that they can use for problem sets. It allows them to retake, see their work, all this kind of other stuff, which is really neat. So that's kind of what we're thinking.
Yeah, the tool that the teachers were doing for online testing, it was called Class Marker. And it was actually, I was pretty impressed with it, where you can share like divisional or like your entire science department can share a bank of questions. So the department chair can review exams and things like that. But it was a really I think for the entire school would cost us like €800 for the year, which we thought was pretty inexpensive.
Sorry, what was the name of that one again?
I'm going to put it in the chat. I'll link it in the chat here. But it was Class Marker. We really liked it. And the students actually liked it quite a bit too. And this was for high school. Did a test. A couple middle schoolers did a test of it. One of the I think our 6th grade teacher liked something else. But like I said, it seemed a bit immature, but 6th graders, they are immature. So.
One question I have is like with all these added resources, like, so if we buy a site license, it always comes out of my academic software budget. But like right now with this software, we have 1 to 2 classes that are looking to add this math software. So what we've done historically, although now it seems to be increasing, is we bill it as a course fee through MBS, our textbook reseller. Are other people doing that for software packages? If you find you take it all and you absorb it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're kind of offsetting it with my printing budget at this point.
Even if it's like 1 class, like even if it's like, like say 2 preps or something, like 40 students, you just pay for it as a school and you don't pass it on as a textbook.
Yeah.
We do, depending on what it is. Some things, if they're related to books, we definitely do that. Some things like RAS Kids, we do associate them more with books than we do tech. So we do exactly what you're suggesting.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not doing that. We probably will rethink that depending on what we end up keeping as a digital resource and assign it to a tech fee, or a book fee or something along those lines. We tend not to collect fees on top of tuition just because we're kind of for Barcelona, we're the most expensive game in town. And so to add more fees on top of that seems like we'll lose a lot of parents who say, oh, it was €25,000 a year, now it's 26, but that's expensive for here.
So guys,
our school is very anti-fee, but we still do it for that matter. Yeah.
Some of the questions that have come up multiple times for this lunch meeting deal with bandwidth. And I'm trying to I guess most of the question is, what kind of bandwidth considerations have you had for the hybrid classroom, supporting streaming from all these classrooms to classrooms? And some are, again, just stated a little more simply, bandwidth, reopening and expectation. So it's really about bandwidth and supporting all of these concepts that we've been talking about. What are your thoughts?
We have a gig right now. I wrote to our ISP asking about the next steps up. We have a 10 gig connection. We have our servers, our backups and everything are held at a data center about 3 miles off campus. And we have a 10 gig fiber connection to that site. And then from there, they just turn it up as we want, obviously with 10 gig being the limit. To get 1.5, it was not bad at all. I think it was an extra like $300 to $400 a month. To go up, I think we paid $1,300 for 1 gig of service a month. To get up to 2, it was around $1,900 a month. And so that's where we are, is kind of, I'm right. It's very easy. It'll take 24 hours to turn it up. I'm not going to turn it up over the summer because literally there's probably 2 people on campus right now. So I'm wondering if I wait and see what happens. And, if we need it, I call them, and we add it on and just go from there, because the infrastructure is already there. It's, if you're getting 1 gig service through Verizon and you need 2 gig service, that's a whole different ballgame, because I don't know if they allow that through their small business plan. You may have to get a second WAN and look at load balancing and all kinds of other considerations. So in that sense, we're in a pretty good spot. And I think I'm just gonna, maybe wait and see where we are.
Yeah, I don't think the load balancing, depending on your firewall, is a big deal. You just pop it in, and I think within 10 minutes you'll be okay if you had to do that. Again, it depends on your firewall, but I imagine most of our current firewalls can do that.
It's just installing a second connection. So like with Comcast and Verizon, like they have to run it up our driveway and stuff like that. Sometimes we, in the past, sometimes we've had to pay those fees, or partially pay them, or they amortize them over the month. I mean, you have to get into a line to be installed. I mean, that's the only thing, is that it all depends where people's connection points to the outside world are.
And the biggest, I think, keeping mindful of individual school resources. Like, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of schools in the DMV area, or anywhere for that matter, who hear $1,300 a month and are like, holy crap, like, where do you come up with that money? Right? And an extra $300 a month, that's probably what a lot of schools are paying for, coax connectivity through RCN for their organizations. And so that's the question about bandwidth probably came more from schools, which there are probably more schools in that position than in the St. Andrews or on that level. Even like at GDSs of the world, like MJ, and all of those schools are going to be in a hurtful position financially come September, to say, like, I have to now up my bandwidth to provide virtual, HyFlex or hybrid schools. That's a hard one for a lot of schools, to, out of nowhere, with possible enrollment going down, saying I now have to pay $1,000 a month when my fees were $300 a month. That's a tough one. So yeah.
That's what we found, that we're more sensitive around operating costs, like, than capital costs. Like, if it's something that you can depreciate over the course of 5 years and put in place and make it happen, like, that is more manageable than suddenly signing contracts, sometimes multi-year contracts, to get service that are going to up your costs quite considerably. That said, I mean, based on that Zoom meeting that we had with the Zoom representative, some of these platforms don't use a lot of bandwidth. Like, that you think that they would, and they don't. It's not the same as 500 kids streaming YouTube or Google Earth. There are these other resources that are real bandwidth hogs, which a lot of us may have already run into, and maybe we have adequate bandwidth to do just that, and may not see that impact.
And I was going to say the same thing as a follow-up to that, is like, yes, like, if I think you have to get a little bit more strict about what is being streamed and what is being done with that bandwidth, as opposed to worrying about Zoom taking up all the bandwidth, because Zoom and Meet don't take up much bandwidth. It's the YouTube streaming and and the downloads and the, you know, someone with viral activity on their BYOD device or mobile devices. Maybe there needs to be a ban on mobile devices because they may be downloading apps and streaming God knows what. I wouldn't worry about the bandwidth from streaming video applications.
Yeah, and Oren, to support what you're saying, we've been taking care of that bandwidth need anyways. The only real addition is going to be the live conferencing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the other question.
And just to follow up, internal networks, you know, you know, you're only as good as your connection to your Wi-Fi is only as good as your switches, and your switches are only as good as your core, and your core is only as good as your firewall. Like, I mean, you can have 2 gigs coming into your campus, but if you have crappy equipment to the client down the chain, you're not going to have a good experience, right? So you have to look at the whole network as a whole. Yeah.
You know, but to support what James was saying as well, we're in the same boat. We've got a gig connection to the school up and down. We've got a 10 gig internal. So I'm almost tempted to wait and see what the load's going to be when the kids come back.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm conscious of our time. I'm going to move us on to the next question that we had. It's supporting performance arts remotely. And also it's tied to this live transcript of spoken English to Spanish, or it could be anything. I have noticed that Teams does that. I turned the feature on, but I haven't tested it since I turned it on because it can take 24 hours after you turn it on, and I forgot to test it. So I believe Teams does do that, but I need to play with it to confirm it. And then in terms of supporting the arts remotely, I know my school would love it if one of you smart people were like, oh, I've got the perfect software so everyone can sing at the same time and it's in sync. So go on, you go.
Doesn't exist.
All right, when it does, let me know. But
I actually demoed a software. It was really nice. I have to say, I'll have to get the link and I'll send it out. But it was we were demoing it for graduation, to do a virtual graduation. We ended up getting permission to do a live graduation, so we just live streamed it. But I was really impressed with this software. The limitation was it only allowed 4 people at a time to speak, but it was in sync. Really pretty amazing. Wasn't very costly and did a really good job. But again, only 4 people. Performing arts is going to be tough. We did a end of year play in our elementary school of Annie virtually, and it was awesome. But it was all edited, and we just put it up on YouTube live, you know, at a certain time and date. But it appeared live, but it was edited. But it was pretty awesome. Yeah, I mean, there were 5th grade students doing Annie. Like, how bad could it be? Very bad. It would have been bad live anyway. So.
Share the name of the software with us.
Huh?
You're going to share the name of the software with us for the.
Yeah, I have to look it up. It was, yeah, I'll find it. Give me like 2 minutes. I'll just look through my.
Does anyone know, does Zoom or Google Meet do a live translation as well?
Both do.
They both
Zoom,
do.
you have to add it on separate. It's in beta or something. And Google, it's right below you. I mean, you just click on turn on captions. It's right at the menu bar.
And then you can actually tell it to translate it once the captions are on?
Oh, translate?
Yeah.
What do you need to translate for?
So if I'm speaking to you in English, it would give you captions in Spanish.
So here's a question for you, Dave.
Why would you want to do that?
I can tell you there have been some situations that I definitely would love for that to happen. So I'm supporting multiple roles at school, and if it could translate it into Spanish live for me that'd be awesome. Now I could also.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Oren.
Well, I think this begs the question: as an organization, would you do that in person?
No.
I think when thinking virtually, we can't provide the Cadillac and then throw the turbo booster on it, right? It's like the teacher wouldn't have a translator in the room to translate something to Spanish if it was in a live school, right? Like there's an expectation, a minimum expectation of we teach in English at this school. That's the school where I'm in Spain, and we are the American school, and we teach in English. Every kid speaks Spanish, but we teach in English.
That's how I feel, is that I feel like I'm constantly asked to squash translation services, like whether it's Google Translate or all these different, that's like a pain point for Spanish teachers. That's why I don't see, you're either immersing yourself by talking in Spanish. Like I could see doing closed captions in Spanish if you were talking in Spanish, that it would do it properly with the accents. That could be beneficial to students. But to translate, that seems counterproductive for education, in my opinion, at least.
Okay, and that may be fair in the directly working with students. That may be totally fair. However, someone did ask this question, and I don't know if they're on with us now or not, but someone did ask this question, so they're needing to do it, and I believe the answer is Teams will do it. The second thing I'd like to address, Oren, is that in my role, there are people that I work with do not speak English, and yes, I do use Google Translate on my phone sometimes to get the message over. So yes.
Guess who one of the people who doesn't speak Spanish in my school is? It's me. So I live on Google Translate. So my whole team speaks either Catalan, English, or Spanish, and I have to understand all three of those languages. So I get that part. Yeah. I just don't that's my problem, not the schools. So.
Can I ask a question to the group real quick? We have a pain point, international students.
Yep.
It looks like it's incredibly difficult for especially new students to come back over. I mean, obviously flights are restricted. Also with new students to get a visa appointment, I don't know how many new students we have right now, but I just heard of a second one being able to get a visa appointment to get their F1. And so right now, what is the plan? How are we accommodating for our Chinese students who are on a 12-hour time change? I mean, I'm hopeful. I've read on Oxford and Cambridge's website, just because they happen to use some of the same platforms we do, that Panopto is available there. If they wanted to join synchronously, they could log in to Zoom, but they have to use a different client, even though they use the Zoom protocol and it's a Zoom meeting. They have to use a Chinese client to connect to Zoom meetings. And I'm worried about supporting these families that are, thousands of miles away. Has anybody planned for this? Or anything?
We're not running into that, but from everything I'm reading, this concept of HyFlex teaching would be more supportive of that environment, or lack of environment, and lack of time zones, consistent time zones.
HyFlex is what, asynchronous learning?
It's both.
Okay. I got to research that. That's a new term for me. So there's a lot of new terms that came up in the past few months.
It's a huge concern for us just because we are an international school. And the good thing is we're part of the EU, and travel restrictions within the EU are not down, and about almost 50% of our kids are local anyway. And I would say only about 20% of our kids are from the US. And right now there's a travel restriction from the US, but most of those 20% are actually already here. We only enroll about 80 new kids a year. And most of them are from the EU. A lot from China, which doesn't have any restrictions right now, in Spain. But it's a concern more for admissions than it is for us in tech. I mean, if they can't come, we're not providing educational services to them, and they're not paying for it. You know,
Okay.
that's all it is. I mean, we're taking the hit on admissions temporarily rather than throwing, you know, €100,000 towards the problem. We'd rather just lose the 100,000 at this point, because that's not what it is. You know, so it's 6 1/2 dozen of the other financially.
You know, to add a thought or a caveat along some of these lines, I've been having some side conversations, and it looks like not a lot. It looks like there's a significant number of parents that do not want to send their kids back to school physically, right? And which also means that we're going to have to accommodate those students that are not on campus, as well as you guys mentioned earlier, some of the staff who are not willing to return to campus in this environment. So that's something that I know we have to think about during our planning. We've got 2 more questions, and I know our time's running short. I'm not disappearing on anyone, but I'd like to get them in so that we can share them back out to the group. And part of that was this idea of tools and devices being used for blended classrooms. I feel like we talked a little bit about that. Is there anything that we want to add to that?
No, not from my perspective. It's like I said at the beginning, and James, you weren't here, but it's off our radar. We plan on having live classes all year, starting from September 1st, and we'll either be in an on-campus full student, or we'll be in virtual school. That's what the government has told us, and what we can accommodate.
So, Oren, you know we love you, but you're rubbing it in, man.
I know, man. I could hold up my camera and show you a video of my pool too. And so,
and then the last question that we haven't really talked about so much is this HyFlex classroom setup. I'm glad it didn't come from me because I feel like I'm the only one talking about it. But maybe we should table that for our next meeting. Give you guys a chance to look it up a little more, and maybe we can have a bit more of a discussion of it.
Would anybody be able to define that?
So I'm going to do my best to define it, but my understanding of the HyFlex is being able to be in a situation that if I'm a student and I can attend the class, great, then I'm there. If I'm a student and I can only attend it remotely, then that's what I'm going to do. If I'm a student and the time doesn't work and I really can't be in the class, I also have the ability to continue doing the class even if it's not live. And it's this idea of being highly flexible for any of these possible circumstances that turn up. And I don't think it means that, hey, we're promoting, we want you to be able to do this anytime, but it's being able to support a student or a teacher in any of those possible environments, including time restrictions.
Interesting.
That's exactly what we're planning for. And to do so, we're relying on our LMS heavily. We just recently have migrated over from Schoology to Canvas and are very pleased with all the integrations that work with Canvas. It's amazing how many apps have been built out to really seamlessly integrate, giving this kind of space that you would go into the course and actually have a virtual classroom. Assignments would just be in the LMS itself, and less bumming around and recording things. The next big thing to us that really facilitates that is that should somebody not be able to join synchronously, say they're sick or something along those lines, or their family is traveling for reasons related to this or any other reason, is this idea that class recordings are accessible, that all classes will be recorded. But more importantly, we use Google Meet in the spring when this all went down, and the class recordings weren't centrally managed, which kind of created a little bit of chaos. Teachers would have requests from students, and they'd be like, do they want that because something was goofy, or do they want that because they want to learn? And it was a really weird area, and it's when you share them that clip is gone, and it's like they have the ability to copy it, do whatever they want with it. So centrally managing those recordings in Panopto for us was a big thing, but there are other tools that do that. But keeping them in Canvas also as an LMS, so that people could, if they miss the class, just go into the LMS, find the course or the teachings for that day, go through it, and then do any of the assignments. And again, getting away from physical paper.
We're looking at Panopto. It came on our radar not only from you, but also from an American school of Milan, I think it was, came on through our head of school. And does it automatically publish it to your LMS?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So it has an awesome integration. It integrates with both Zoom. This is why we went with it, to be honest. It integrates with both Zoom and Canvas, so that when the Zoom recording is done for that teacher, it'll automatically pull that meeting and even delete it from Zoom if you don't, because Zoom education accounts have smaller storage requirements than the pro ones. It will pull it out of Zoom, delete it from Zoom, and then hold it in Panopto in that course. So, and it becomes bound to that course in that folder for that course that you created in it. The LTI integration and setup between, you connect Zoom and Panopto together, and then Zoom and Canvas, and then Panopto and Canvas. The setup of it is a little convoluted, and while I have it set up, there's 1,000,001 checkboxes that you really need to see. You want to populate for each course, you want to do this, but once it's set up, it will do just that. And that's what we're trying to create, is a feeling for the faculty that it's set it and forget it. Like, there was a lot of fear about putting cameras in the classroom because they thought that they were IP cams that were always recording. But once they realized that it's just relocating your camera and microphone from the top of your monitor to the back of the classroom to give a better view so you don't have to angle your device, it put them at ease, and they realized that it's just like where we were in the spring. It's just in a different locale. And so those are the benefits that we saw from it. Panopto is pricey. It does come with quote unlimited storage, which is not unlimited if you talk to them, but it will more than compensate. I mean, they have entire universities. It seems to be the default of what universities use for their.
It's an enterprise level software package. I know I shared the link to some Google features that were shared with me. I don't know if others have seen it, but I think Google Meet, fit the bill for virtual school in a very temporary state of March through June. We've kept Zoom on our radar. I have a lot of issues with Zoom privacy and as a company, but hearing that Google Meet is going to have Zoom-like features come August for $24 per teacher per year, and all your students and other faculty or other staff are free. That's a big game changer for us. Breakout rooms, centralized recording, all the features that you want. 49-person grid view. It's Zoom. It's Zoom but within your ecosystem of Google, and that's a big game changer there for us.
Yeah, we're able to do a lot of that through Teams, and they're rolling out right now the 49 view as well, which I'm excited about, because it would be nice for our teachers not to have to keep jumping between different systems.
So have you explored Teams as an LMS? Because I just started testing that this week.
Yeah, our middle school is using it as an LMS, and we've got a teacher who's really good with it. So my next meeting, they're actually going to be creating a PD for the rest of the staff on how to use it, from all the assignments and how they're uploading and how their workflow is. So I'm kind of excited to get that all recorded and out to the teacher.
Because we actually don't have a good we use Google Classroom as our main LMS, and it's clunky at best. It's borderline in a learning management system. And we were looking at Canvas, we're looking at and then Teams came up on my radar just last week, and it's really interesting because I think it does more than Google Classroom does. And
I'm happy to I'm happy to remote you in or anyone in it at any point and show you. And
Yeah.
also, I'll check with my teacher, but if she's okay, I'm happy to share the PD that we create as well.
All right. I would love that. Yeah, thanks.
I will just give my plug for Canvas. We did a LMS task force last year with students, parents, faculty, administrators, and Canvas really shined. We're looking for integration and the ability for things to integrate, and that's why I'm really excited about Google. But still, that would be like a year two, should we need a platform for year two or something like that for us, simply because Zoom's integration with everything that we've worked with is just phenomenal. And that's what I really want to take that pressure off the faculty who are already worried about teaching in a new environment and doing new things, and really just say, yeah, just open your Canvas course. You can create a Zoom meeting from here. It's automatically added to this bucket, and those kind of integrations. And Canvas supports that phenomenally well. They integrate with just about everybody, and I highly recommend them. It's a little bit more pricey, but they do. They just were bought by a venture capital firm, which is always terrifying to me when these ed tech companies that you just signed contracts with are suddenly bought up by these bigger entities that have other motives. So I have no idea with the future of it, but I just wanted to put that out as a disclaimer. I can't imagine they would change it. It's such a huge platform used by higher ed, but I think it will change its pricing structure. If anything, probably make it more cheaper and accessible.
Were they purchased by Power School also?
No, they were purchased by a VC firm, like billions, like $5 billion or some astronomical fee. I can't remember what it was. But we signed with Whipple Hill 3 months before Blackbaud bought them. And Blackbaud did not do good things for that startup. I mean, Whipple Hill was an awesome, awesome company, and Blackbaud just put the brakes on it like they do with everything. So but I have high hopes that it'll maintain. Yeah.
That was so painful. That was the days when they started a business office portion of of Blackbaud, and then they stopped and then bought Smart Tuition and then never integrated it. And
their development staff is either overstretched or just ill-equipped to do what the leadership is thinking. Yeah, but so it's always a dangerous.
Great to hear that now, guys.
They're a good product.
Just crap.
Guys, so
it doesn't integrate, even in internal systems don't integrate. And it doesn't integrate smoothly with other things either. And it's like
Razor's Edge and
PCR actually turned out to be a better product than Blackbaud.
We felt that at the beginning when we moved from PCR, but now we're glad to be away from PCR. But yes, there are things that PCR could do really well because it was written by a tech guy that Blackbaud just can't execute well at all. But Blackbaud has grown on us, but now we literally have duplicate systems for everything. We use a different admission module, a different LMS, a different. They were just able to work with us on price, so now I don't mind them as much. But apparently they're hurting because they hired all new local reps and then laid them off within 3 months.
You're making me all feel very happy that I went with Veracross.
I've got to run, guys. It's like.
Yeah, I was conscious of our time. Was there any questions that you guys wanted, like we're desperate to get out before our next meeting that you didn't, or has everybody been able to ask what they wanted to? Awesome.
I'm satisfied.
Hey guys, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you all. You make my life easier at work, so thank you. And I'll talk to you guys the following week.
Cool.
Sounds good.
All right, take it easy.
Bye.